Shh. Listen carefully. The night is darker than it seems. Shadows stretch longer, and whispers crawl through the silence. This is not just a story, it's a door. Once you step in, there is no way back, so close your eyes, let the darkness surround you, and remember, the things you fear the most are already waiting in the dark. The Collector of Last Breaths. The world, for Silas, was a gallery of exquisite fragility. He saw what most people spent their entire lives running from, the truth that human beings were nothing more than glass, transparent, fragile, and destined to shatter. Where others looked away, he leaned in. Where others flinched, he reached out. He was a connoisseur of final moments, an artisan of last breaths. Not a killer born from rage. Not a man chasing the usual cliches of vengeance, power, or some festering childhood wound. No, Silas killed for something far more terrifying in its purity. He killed for emotion. It was the crescendo, you see, the peak of human experience. In the final seconds before death, all masks fell away. Society's lies, carefully polished personas, every thin facade of normalcy, gone. What bloomed in their place was raw, undiluted humanity. And Silas, he fed on that. Some souls erupted in fire, their last moments crackling with defiance, a futile flame reaching for the heavens even as it guttered out. Others collapsed into whimpers, their terror so pure, so childlike, that it poured into Silas like the richest vintage wine. Some fell to desperate bargaining, clawing for invisible gods they had ignored their whole lives. And the rarest, oh the rarest, met him with quiet dignity, their acceptance like a knife in his own heart. He collected those moments, cherished them, carved them into the gallery of his mind. Each memory a masterpiece, each soul a painting he could revisit when the hunger clawed at him in the dark. His latest masterpiece in waiting was a young woman named Elara. He had watched her for weeks, never with the slobbering hunger of a predator, but with the reverence of an art historian studying an irreplaceable relic. She was a painter, her small ground floor studio lit late into the night, her movements fluid and sure as she layered cobalt skies over ochre hills. Her hands smudged with color, her hair perpetually untamed. She painted with a kind of aching honesty. She felt. Silas could tell. Her brush didn't copy landscapes, it translated them into emotion. Every piece was a fragment of her soul smeared onto canvas. She would be magnificent. On the night he chose, the world outside was hushed, streets washed in pale lamplight, leaves scratching softly against windows. Silas didn't break in like a thief. He turned the lock with a quiet key he had crafted. No alarms, no smashing glass, only silence. The air inside smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. To Silas, it was sacred incense. But Elara was not at her easel. He found her curled on a sofa, book in hand, a single lamp spilling warm, buttery light across her. Her hair fell loose across her cheek, her face calm, softened in the stillness of reading. She looked up when she sensed him, her brow furrowed in confusion, not yet fear. "Who are you?" she asked, voice steady, though Silas heard the tremor beneath. He smiled, soft, paternal, almost gentle. "Just an admirer of your work, Elara." Confusion flickered, calculation sparking in her eyes. She measured his size, the distance to the door, the weight of objects around her. Then, the realization slid into her gaze, sharp and cold. Fear. The first note of the symphony. "Please," she said, her whisper trembling like a candle flame. "Take whatever you want. My wallet's on the table." "Oh, I don't want your money." Silas stepped closer. The floorboard beneath him groaned, a soft accompaniment to her quickened breathing. "I want the masterpiece you keep locked inside. I want to see it." He moved with sudden precision, one hand clamping over her mouth, the other pinning her arms. He was not cruel in his grip. No blows, no wild violence. That would be crude, like smashing porcelain with a hammer. No, his touch was controlled, purposeful. "Shh," he breathed into her ear, his voice hypnotic. "Don't waste this moment on panic. This is the most important moment of your life, more important than your first kiss, your greatest triumph. This is the moment of truth. Give it to me. Let me see what you're made of." She writhed weakly against him, muffled sobs in his hand, but Silas carried her easily, reverently, into her studio. The room smelled of paint, of creation. He lowered her into the chair before her blank canvas, as though seating her on a throne. His hand slid from her mouth but pressed firmly to her shoulder. She gasped, tears glistening down her face. "What are you going to do?" she whispered, voice thin as glass. "Take whatever you want. My wallet's on the table." Silas produced his knife. It was not crude, not brutish, a slender, boning knife, polished and gleaming under the overhead bulb. He touched its flat side to her throat, the cold kiss making her shiver. "I'm going to set you free," he said with quiet reverence. From his pocket he drew a brush, its bristles soaked in crimson pigment he had prepared. It glistened wetly, thick and dark, not paint. He placed it in her trembling hand. "And you," he whispered, "are going to paint your final truth. Not a tree, not a landscape. Your soul, Elara. Show me what you see on the edge of the abyss." A sob tore from her chest. "I can't." "You can." His voice softened into dreadful intimacy. "You are an artist. This is your ultimate medium. Leave behind something true." His words burrowed past her terror. Something flickered in her eyes, not acceptance, but a surreal fracture of reality. Fear still fluttered wildly within her, but beside it bloomed something stranger, a grim, horrified purpose. Her hand quivered as she lifted the brush. She turned her gaze to the blank canvas, then to him. And in her eyes, Silas saw not just fear, he saw pity. The sensation struck him like cold water. He, Silas, collector of crescendos, was pitied. The hollowness within him, the hunger he carried, was exposed beneath her gaze. It was unacceptable. Still, she pressed the brush to the canvas. The stroke was deliberate, slow, a crimson curve heavy with sorrow, not frantic, not desperate, a statement. She painted herself, a figure curled small, fetal, fragile. But around it she did not draw darkness. She painted light, a terrible, brilliant golden radiance that consumed the figure, dissolving it into something vast and unknowable. Her tears fell silently, but her gaze stayed fixed on the work. She painted not her terror, but her transcendence. Silas watched, rapt, shaken. His crescendo was gone. In its place was something he had not sought, had not wanted. He was not the artist, he was the subject. Elara was painting him, his emptiness, his hunger, his damnation. The brush trembled in Elara's hand, but it did not falter. Every stroke was weaker, yet each one carried a weight that pressed down on Silas's chest like a stone. He leaned forward, mesmerized, his knife slackening in his fingers as though it no longer belonged to him. Her crimson figure curled smaller and smaller, swallowed by a radiance so bright it seemed almost alive, as though she were dissolving into a place beyond his reach. The strokes wavered, translucent now, her strength bleeding into the canvas. Her breath rattled. Her lips moved faintly, though no words came, only the ghost of meaning. And then, with one final quivering motion, she let the brush slip from her fingers. It fell to the floor, leaving a scarlet starburst on the wood. Her body sagged in the chair, her head tilting forward, strands of paint-matted hair falling across her cheek. The masterpiece was complete. For a long moment, silence reigned. Only the faint hum of the overhead bulb filled the room. Silas stood motionless, staring at the painting. It was not what he had expected. Where he had always sought fire and terror, bargaining and despair, here was something entirely different, something unbearable. The canvas did not scream. It did not rage. It looked back at him. The curled figure, dissolving into light, was no victim. It was a mirror, a reflection of his own emptiness. He had wanted her fear, her last truth. Instead, she had given him something far worse, a revelation. Silas's breath grew uneven. For years, every death had been a feast, each final moment filling him with stolen emotion, warming the hollow void within his chest. But now, there was no warmth, no crescendo, only a yawning emptiness. He felt seen, exposed. The pity in her eyes still lingered, etched into his memory sharper than any blade. It had not been fear she left him with. It was judgment. His hand rose, trembling to his own chest. The void was still there, but now he understood it differently. He was not the artist, not the collector. He was the canvas, blank, hungry, painted over and over again by the souls he had stolen. Each stroke, another layer of monstrosity. Each death, a brush dipped in terror and smeared across him until there was nothing left of Silas but the portrait of a hollow man. His breath hitched, his vision blurred. He staggered back a step, the knife slipping from his grip and clattering against the floor. The sound rang like a bell tolling through the suffocating silence. The room seemed to press in, the smell of turpentine thickening, mixing with the metallic tang of blood until he felt sick. The painting glowed faintly under the light, the figure within dissolving further into its golden abyss, and he could not look away. It followed him, no matter how he shifted, its presence pressing against his mind like a hand on his skull. For the first time in his life, Silas felt fear, not the distant echo he tasted in others, but his own, pure, metaphysical, a terror not of death, not of punishment, but of truth. He stumbled from the chair, nearly tripping over Elara's fallen brush, and backed toward the door. The shadows of the studio lengthened around him, the canvases stacked against the walls looming like witnesses. Every smear of color seemed alive now, watching, judging. He fled. But when he stepped into the night air, the suffocating weight did not leave him. He carried the studio with him. He carried the smell of turpentine and iron. He carried the image burned against the back of his eyelids. Elara's painting, his portrait, his curse. The hunger remained. Oh yes, the craving still clawed at him, the addict's need for one more moment, one more soul to steal. But now he understood what he had never allowed himself to see. He was not feeding. He was being devoured. Every life he ended had not filled him. It had hollowed him out, gouged him deeper, left him more brittle, more vacant. He was not the master of these moments. He was their vessel, their collection. The gallery in his mind, once so precious, now twisted into a hall of accusing mirrors. Faces he had thought of as trophies stared back at him, their mouths open not in fear, but in silent condemnation. The void inside him deepened. It yawned like a great maw, threatening to open and swallow him whole. And for the first time, Silas wondered if it already had. He did not return to his sanctuary that night. He wandered the streets instead, eyes darting at every shadow, ears pricked at every whisper of wind. The city seemed louder, sharper, crueler. He had always felt invisible among its faceless masses, a ghost drifting undetected. Now every passerby's glance seemed to pierce him, to know him. The image would not fade. Elara's fragile figure dissolving into radiance. Her eyes filled not with terror, but with pity, that damnable pity. Silas, the collector of crescendos, had become the final piece in his own cursed collection, and the brushstrokes of his damnation would never dry.